Good day, mates. My name is Mordecai, and welcome back to the show, where a relatively inexperienced roleplayer narrates various RPG-related stories as a learning tool. It is often said that Dungeons & Dragons is considered to be a highly approachable tabletop role-playing game. With a strong prevalence, multiple live streams showcasing live examples of play, and a lot of content being continually made, it conveys the perception of 5th edition being easy to access and highly flexible. However, this can create a problem when a group requires a more specialized tabletop role-playing system for a particular purpose or scenario, because whilst 5th edition is inherently flexible and encourages creativity within the rules as intended, there are some cases where it just simply isn't fit for purpose. Some of these cases can include army strategy war games, apocalyptic scenarios and campaigns that are meant to be low power, or diplomacy-focused settings with a reliance on intrigue. So, how does the system being used fail the Dungeon Master and players in today's story? Let us find out as we undertake another delve. Before we get started with the narration, if you like my content and want to see more of it, be sure to subscribe and like the video. It's free and you can always change your mind later. Enjoy! Let's delve into the often terrifying world of r/RPGHorrorStories. Today's story is titled DM Kicks New Player from Their Gritty Zombie Campaign, aka Please Play Something Other Than 5th Edition, and is written by user ddizzy192. I originally wasn't going to be posting this story until I got a message from the cleric about the aftermath of the most recent game, so here we are. The cast consists of myself, the cleric as the new player, the DM as a bit of a problem, Rogue as the other voice of focus, and a server moderator that comes into play much later in the story. I myself am fairly new to tabletop role-playing games, although I have watched plenty of videos about Dungeons & Dragons, but I had only really started playing last year, although after finishing a campaign with some great people whom I'm still playing with today, I wanted a bit more Dungeons & Dragons pumped into my veins. So, after a bit of shopping around the looking for games, I joined a server advertising a gritty zombie survival campaign set in the modern day. It looked like fun, so we session zeroed to make our characters. The first rule established in the session zero was that there were to be no warlocks, wizards, sorcerers, or druids. The real world doesn't have magic, so they can't really exist. The second rule was that we had to flavor abilities so that they could work in the modern day, aka a cleric's guiding bolt being replaced with a bottle rocket, etc. It wasn't a real biggie, but it did make things a bit awkward in terms of planning and such, which led to the cleric messaging me at one point asking about game mechanics. I helped as best as I could, and we moved on to the actual game day. Session 1 was rough. We woke up in a hotel room, most of us hungover with a single level of exhaustion. Some plot elements happened, with most of the players clearing their exhaustion, and some zombies started attacking us. We locked ourselves in our room and looted supplies, which led to an hour of players asking if they could do basic things like check the kitchen for weapons, being told that there were knives that were reskinned daggers, but later being told that we apparently somehow missed frying pans, the equivalent of maces, because we forgot to ask? At one point, one of the players sat on the couch and lost around half of their health from being poked by a spring. Afterwards, we opened the door and there was a young girl outside of it, covered in blood, an NPC. The group brought her in and talked to her. She was talking about how there was a room down the hallway with a rifle within, and ends up lending my character an energy drink to help clear his exhaustion. We mull over our options with me and the rogue, wanting to get out of the hotel as soon as possible, whilst the others were insisting on wanting that gun. I did try to roll persuasion against the party, to get the girl and possibly the entire group to understand that there were zombies around, and that we should move on as guns will just attract more as it keeps getting shot and making a lot of noise, and going down the hall for one is a completely unnecessary risk. The DM then asks if I actually drank the energy drink, and because I thought it was implied that I did, I didn't necessarily declare it. So I still had to deal with a whole level of exhaustion, and thus I ended up failing, leading to all of us going to the room down the hall. 10 minutes of trying and failing to kill a guy that had a gun, that kept screaming loudly when someone hit him with something, and then we ended up searching the room for another 5 minutes or so to find absolutely nothing. The rogue was trying to move us along, getting audibly frustrated from being talked over. I'm trying to do the same, to the point where I just declare I'm sneaking off to find a route downstairs, and high rolls being that I'm able to do this. Zombies attack. The combat goes by, whilst I'm explaining things here and there to the cleric, and although he does get a bit bitten, we win. This is followed up by an even bigger horde of zombies attacking. We all book it for the way out that I had found, primarily due to me and Rogue basically leaving and saying, "Follow us or die to those things." We get to my escape route, an indoor fire exit, but oh wait, my character didn't look down and noticed that the stairs were missing one floor down below. Oh no. The session ends and the Dungeon Master allows us to level up to 2nd level. The rogue dropped out before the next session. He cited that 7 players was too much for him to play with effectively. The second session began with us waiting for another new player, and a bit of info from the Dungeon Master that Cleric was on notice. Apparently, he was a tad young and had been called flaky. I thought he talked a lot and asked a lot of questions, but chalked it up to being really eager to play Dungeons & Dragons for the first time, and that a conversation with the DM could fix that issue. The Dungeon Master's plan was to kill him off if he slipped up. So we started the session half an hour later, then it ended about 20 minutes in. The Dungeon Master had to run errands, and the party then agreed to meet next week, so that we could play bi-weekly. They somehow didn't hear me repeatedly mention that I couldn't make that session, because I thought we wouldn't be playing and took an extra shift at work. 2 days later, I decided that I too would back out of the game. This leads to the most recent game session. I got a message from Cleric asking if I had left the game. I told him that yeah, I did, and I asked how things had went. He told me that he had died, and because the Dungeon Master wanted death to be permanent, he was removed from the game, although 2 new players did join in. I then informed him about what the DM had told me, and he got in touch with a server admin who pretty much told him that because he had scheduling issues in a different game, and that had put him on watch, that basically allowed the DM to kick him for no given reason. He felt like he really wanted to quit D&D in general, but I told him to try again with a different group and maybe stay away from Discord servers. And there we go. Probably way more rambling than needed, but that's everything that has happened so far. Although, to keep my post title accurate, 5th edition is popular right now, but it isn't the only tabletop system available. If you want a low magic setting or a different flavour to abilities, play something other than Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. I've never played it myself, but a few of my friends have said that Call of Cthulhu would work well with what the DM was attempting. In summary, our DM twists 5th edition into a modern low magic setting for 7 players. After much talking over each other, 2 of them quitting, and a kid getting removed for being new and having scheduling conflicts, I too bowed out. And that's the end of the story. I have a number of thoughts on this story, but let's begin with the haystack, which features more needles than hay. 5th edition is certainly popular, but this particular Dungeon Master would have caused problems regardless of which system was being used. And whilst I would encourage people to seek out using alternative systems, such as Call of Cthulhu, GLOG, or even Blades in the Dark, I cannot blame people for wanting to stick to the familiar. And I can certainly commend effort being made to bring in additional homebrew elements to try and make the existing system work in a new environment. However, part of the draw of Dungeons & Dragons is in its elements of fantasy, especially the prevalence of in-universe magic. Thus, a Dungeons & Dragons campaign set in modern times would have access to sorcerers and druids as much as it would have access to electronics and firearms. So, the DM turning around and banning magic because it doesn't exist in real life, before mandating that clerics and the like describe their abilities, which are still magic in the system, in terms of real-world equivalents, that's a rather bizarre change. And it doesn't exactly promise a stable environment for a new player either. There are also other elements to consider as well with regards to the Dungeon Master. The decision for a serious consideration such as death being permanent without declaring this in Session 0 is certainly an odd choice. I can imagine how many players would jump out immediately if they did mention that was how they were intending to run the campaign. Having a player take a huge amount of damage because they sat on a sofa is also strange. And we also have the DM not mentioning the existence of frying pans in the kitchen because the players didn't explicitly ask for that specific information. And we also cannot forget about the mysteriously broken stairs either. Because when I look at all of these different aspects put together, we are left with a player antagonistic mess. And as an inexperienced tabletop role-playing enthusiast, the main lesson I walk away from the story with is to be flexible in considering other systems, and to run games that are not built on the premise of being player antagonistic. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe and leave a like. It's free to do, and you can change your mind later. If you have any thoughts on this story or feedback on how it can improve, feel free to leave a comment. Again, thank you very much for watching, and I shall see you all next time.